بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to lesson number 22 from our lessons from the text Al-Akhlaq Al-Adudiya by the great Imam Qadi Al-Qudat Abdul bin Ahmad bin Abdul Al-Iji Al-Shirazi rahimahullah ta'ala wa nafa'ana bihi fi ad-darain. This, as you know, is a text on akhlaq, which are the virtues, and at the same time we also speak about the vices. And these, as we know, just as a quick revision, the akhlaq are habits within our souls that cause or almost or very influential in our behavior, such that we act upon them very easily and without much deliberation. We are up to the section on the book which covers the virtues related to courage. And as we know, the virtue of courage is a balance of the faculty of anger. And that is that faculty within the human soul which seeks to repel harm from us. So a balance of that faculty of anger which seeks to repel harm from us, results in this virtue of courage. And when there is too little anger, as we know, it results in the vice of cowardice. And when there is too much anger, then it results in the vice of recklessness. So courage is a virtue between two extremes, the extreme of deficiency and the extreme of excess. So the sub-virtue of courage, which we will be speaking about today, is the sub-virtue of what we call in the Arabic is ash-shahama, which in the English we can translate to vigor. But before we speak about that, we want to speak a little bit about a few of the preceding sub-virtues, the first being greatness of soul. As we know, the first sub-virtue of courage is greatness of soul, which we've spoken about before. And what is that? We can define greatness of soul as essentially someone who recognizes the dunya as being insignificant, recognizes wealth and influence and fame and these things which are termed the dunya as insignificant. In and of themselves, they are insignificant. They could gain value if they are used as means towards the akhirah, but in and of itself, they are insignificant. Now, a branch out of that sub-virtue of greatness of soul is the seventh sub-virtue, which we spoke about last week, or the previous lesson, which is the sub-virtue of humility. Because someone who recognizes the insignificance of the dunya, recognizes the insignificance of wealth and the insignificance of fame and popularity, things like that, they necessarily also would then, because we don't want to be people, remember, virtues are about a mean between two extremes. Because we don't want to be people that completely see everything as insignificant. Everything has no meaning. That's not what we're speaking about here. But rather, we as Muslims, as people who are seeking to become people of virtue, we see the dunya as insignificant. But what do we see as significant? And this is really highlighted in the virtue of humility, which is to regard people of virtue as significant. And also, not just that, but also people who are lesser in wealth and fame. So essentially people who are lesser than ourselves in dunya, we also see them as significant. So we spoke about this in the previous lesson in terms of humility. It's about acknowledging the value of people. It's about acknowledging the great value of the virtues in people. But at the same time, it's also about recognizing the inherent value of people in and of themselves. And at the same time, right, it's also about recognizing that we are not better than them as well. Why did I say that? Because we don't want to just recognize humility as that virtue in which we are always lowering ourselves, right? It's a balance, right? Because too much lowering of ourselves can result in someone becoming a doormat, right? Someone who is always flattering other people. So this is the vice. This is a vice of deficiency. We want to have a balanced, right? We want to have a balanced humility, which begins with what? Which begins with seeing the value in the virtues, seeing the value in the. Can begin with the cardinal virtues, the virtues of wisdom, the virtue of courage, temperance, and justice. These virtues, and whoever possess these virtues, we see these people as very significant, and also to recognize that people in and of themselves, even though they might not have much wealth, even though they might not have that much fame or popularity, they are in and of themselves very significant. So that was the seventh. That was the seventh sub-virtue that grew out of the first sub-virtue, which was greatness of soul. Now the eighth one, the eighth sub-virtue of courage out of the 11 is vigor, ash-shahama. This is what we will be speaking about today, inshaAllah. So the great Imam al-Iji, he says in his text, Bismillah, he says, ash-shahamatu, what is it? What is the definition of ash-shahama, the definition of vigor? It is الحرص على ما يوجب الذكر الجميل من العظائم. So he says here, the eighth is vigor, namely the eagerness, al-hirs, the eagerness to pursue great matters, al-azaim, great matters that necessitate fair repute. This is there's a lot to unpack in this. Let's unpack that in relation to a particular verse which has been mentioned by one of the commentators of this text in relation to this virtue of vigor. So the great Imam Tash Kubrizada, who is one of the commentators of the text which we are reading about here, he mentions a particular verse from Surah Al-Mu'minun in which Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. He says, Allah Most High says, Ulaika yusari'una fil khayrati wa hum laha sabiqun. And a very, we can say a very loose translation, we can say those, referring to the believers, those who strive towards the khayrat, towards good. وَهُمْ لَهَا سَابِقُونَ, and they are the first. We'll speak a little bit about that. So those who strive, يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. So the word which I wanted to focus on here is the word yusari'una, or at least three words here, yusari'una fil khayrat, those who strive towards good, al khayrat. And this is very much connected to the definition of shahama, which we spoke about earlier, right? The eagerness to pursue great matters that necessitate fair repute, and these are the khayrat, these are the good matters. But what are the khayrat? So the mufassirun, or the scholars of tafsir, they mention two possibilities of what is meant by al khayrat. Firstly, it is the ta'at, matters which are in obedience to Allah's commands, right? So it's one of the understandings of the word al khayrat, al ta'at, acts. What sort of acts? Acts of the heart, acts of the tongue, acts of the body, of everything, whether it's actions of performance or actions of omission, abstaining from things, all of those with a desire to obey God's commands. That's one of the first meanings, one of the understandings of what is meant by al khayrat, at ta'at, obedience to Allah. Now the second understanding of the word al-khayrat is also very interesting. What is meant by al-khayrat in its second possible meaning? The ulama of tafsir, they mention al-khayrat al-dunyawiyya al-maw'uda ala salih al-a'mal. So what's the second understanding of al-khayrat? There are actually dunyawi matters, good things in the dunya, but good things in the dunya which are promised as a result of doing good deeds. All right. So let's take a very clear example of that. There is the verse in the Quran in which Allah says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tansurullaha yansurkum wa yuthabbit aqdamakum." So that translates to, "O believers, if you stand up for Allah," what does that mean? If you work towards the deen of Allah, if you work towards the victory of the deen of Allah, what happens? Then He will help you and make your steps firm. So that's a khair in the dunya, right? Allah gives you victory in the dunya, and this is an example of a dunyawi good. And other examples of dunyawi goods, a righteous spouse, children, halal rizq, wealth, right? These are all dunyawi goods. But the question is here, the question which we need to ask ourselves is, how do we understand the seeking, right? The eagerness to pursue the goods in the dunya. So this is because why is that? Because it's very clear when someone desires and strives towards obedience of Allah, that's clear, right? And we know that the khayrat of the goods of the akhirah are of greater value and essentially everlasting. So that's clear what it means when we say for someone to strive towards the khayrat, obedience of Allah, right? But what does it mean, right? What does it mean for someone to strive towards the khayrat, right, or strive towards the goods in the dunya? It's and the tafsir clarifies that. It says here, someone who strives towards the goods of the dunya, right? But these goods of the dunya are promised through acts of good, through salih al-a'mal. And how does one strive towards goods of the dunya? You do so by striving towards the acts of good, which then produce goods of these goods in the dunya. And it brings us back to that first verse which we mentioned, in which Allah says, "In tansurullaha yansurkum," right? This is as we know, this is a conditional sentence. If, right? If you give victory to the deen of Allah, then Allah will help you. So by working towards the deen of Allah, whether it's in da'wah, as in public da'wah to people, or whether it's even in working in your family with your spouse, with your children, so that it is an environment of family which remembers Allah, recites the Quran, right? These are all examples of nasru dinillah, as in standing up for the deen of Allah. So by performing that, right, by performing that act of supporting, giving nasr, giving victory to the deen of Allah, what will then Allah give you? Allah will then give you victory over your enemies, over people that are against you, who don't want the best for you, right? Then Allah will give you victory against them. So So that's what we mean, right? That's what we mean when someone is striving for good in the dunya, right? How do they strive for good things in the dunya? By doing the good deeds that necessitate the good things in the dunya. So in the end, it always ties back to essentially obeying Allah, or performing a'malus salihah, or performing good deeds. And this actually ties us back to the definition of vigour, the definition of ash-shahama, which is namely the eagerness to pursue great matters that necessitate fair repute, right? So someone is eager, right? Has hirs, a positive hirs, a positive eagerness to pursue great matters, right? What are these great matters? As we mentioned, they are the ta'at, it is obedience of Allah, as well as a'malus salihah, good deeds that necessitate fair repute, that necessitate good reputation. And this is an interesting concept, I think, where we think about, okay, what is the ruling, right? What is the ruling, or what are the ahkam related to acting, right? Acting in the world, so that you have a good reputation, right? Some people might think, someone might think only Allah is important, and I shouldn't care too much about what other people say. Right? There's truth in that, right? There's truth in that, in the sense that we shouldn't care about what we shouldn't let the actions of people over influence our own decisions, because in the end we are responsible for our own actions. But that doesn't mean that reputation is unimportant. In fact, the ulama, they speak about two types of tamliq. Tamliq is the word tamliq in the Arabic means to come to own something, right? To come to own something. For example, there's something called tamliq al-mal, right? To come to own wealth. And this is clear. How do you do that? An example of that is to work, right? You work and then you earn wealth, and it has its rulings associated with that, right? Some amount of earning wealth is a fard upon you to fulfill your obligations, to pay back your debts, right? So that's an obligation upon someone. So that's tamliqul mal, that's coming to own wealth. But there's actually another sort of tamliq which is very interesting, which is called tamliq al-qulub, to come to own the hearts of people. Obviously it's not literally, we can't own the hearts of people, but this goes back to this is very much related with gaining a good reputation, gaining a good standing with people. And this is important because why? Because it helps you in fulfilling your obligations to the deen, right? What's an example of tamliq al-qulub? What's an example of coming to own the hearts of people? For example, you have a friend who you want to perhaps come closer to the deen, right? It's important, right? It's important that you act in a particular way, right? You act in a particular way such that you have influence over that person, so that then when you give them advice, that person will then listen to you and do things which are good for their dunya and their akhirah. This is an example of what we call tamliqul qulub, or coming to own the hearts of people, influencing people. So this is how we can understand. This is how we can understand the virtue of shahama, right? Where we've defined it as vigor. What is this vigor? It's this eagerness to pursue great matters of obedience to Allah or righteous deeds, but these matters of obedience and these righteous deeds also necessitate fair repute. They also necessitate a good reputation. And as we mentioned, there is nothing wrong in working towards gaining a fair reputation, right? Gaining a good reputation by pursuing these great matters of obedience and righteous deeds. But once again, as we know, it always goes back to asking the question, why are you, or why is this person working towards a good reputation, right? Obviously, someone gaining a good reputation so that they can show off, right? Or so that they can use that reputation for evil, all of this is impermissible, right? Just like someone who is earning wealth to show off, or earning wealth to use it for matters which are evil, right? That's impermissible. But at the same time, right, working, doing good deeds, obeying Allah, and at the same time acknowledging that, okay, this is actually giving me a good reputation, right? That's nothing wrong with that, as long as that person understands, right? As long as that person understands that this good reputation, right? They have to ask themselves, why are you seeking this good reputation? Are you seeking this good reputation so that you can feel good about yourself? Perhaps someone has what we can call issues of self-esteem. You know, these are, as in, it can't be matters of the nafs, right? It can't be matters of the going back to the virtue of greatness of soul, right? Someone can't be seeking reputation because they see it as something valuable in and of itself, because that's not a good thing. Reputation is only a good thing if it helps us towards our deen. So hopefully, you know, that was a bit of a roundabout explanation, but I hope that's been of benefit. And just to revise, we say that what is vigour? Vigour is a sub-virtue of the virtue of courage, and the definition of that is an eagerness to pursue great matters, an eagerness to pursue obedience to Allah, an eagerness to pursue good deeds, and these happen to as well necessitate fair repute, necessitate a good reputation. And we spoke about it, right? As in, it's permissible to seek a good reputation. But how is that sought? How is a good reputation sought? A good reputation is sought by performing a'mal salihah that necessitate that good reputation. So we ask Allah to make us of people of good akhlaq, and we will end here inshaAllah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.